Will everyone please stand for a minute with me? We're going to play a brief and very rapid game of charades. I'm going to put 4 words on the screen. You have 3 seconds per word to act it out with the largest motions you possibly can without hurting your neighbor. Good luck. First word, run. Second word, build. Oh, that was good. Third word, celebrate. Yeah. Fourth word, acknowledge. Thank you. You can sit down. Here at TED, we are a community of people seeking solutions. Our natural inclination is want to run organizations. We want to build movements and celebrate victories. But I want to talk today about something a little different, about something we've learned while working in prison. And that is this: acknowledging isn't so natural, and we need to do more of it. Because if we want to do the running, the building, and the celebrating that we're so natural at, we have to spend more time in that slow and a little bit awkward act of acknowledging. I've never been to prison, but when I was 12, I learned about America's prisons. It was over Tuesday night spaghetti dinner. And I remember hearing stories about 2 million Americans incarcerated, leaving another 2 million children at home without a parent. I remember hearing about hostile environments and about overcrowded rooms, and that the standard release practice from prison was usually 2 a.m., a bus stop, maybe $20 and a round of meds. But that these weren't prisons far away. These are prisons in my country. And in fact, we are incarcerating more people in America than anywhere else. So being 12, I leapt up from the table, grabbed a bright blue marker, and began to write the congressman. My letter never reached the congressman. But that was my moment when I joined this community of someone seeking solutions. It wasn't until a decade later that I learned that the problem was muckier than I thought. Sunni is a native Bostonian and a natural-born leader. He spent many years in prison after coming into trouble as a young 20-something, and related his experience to me about what it was like to get out of that environment and try to find your feet again. He looked for resources and for help, and he found some: resume training workshop, job placement program. But while he was telling me his story, he said this: "Jen, the problem is that prison teaches you how to lie. Prison teaches you that the way to survive is through manipulation, deceit, and every man for himself. And if someone comes out of that environment and, say, gets placed in a job, they're going to think that the way to succeed is through manipulation, deceit, and every man for himself. And that's not going to work. Of those 2 million Americans in prison, 95% of them come back into the communities to be neighbors. And because of that environment they're coming out of and the lack of services, 2/3 of them are back within the system after just a couple of years. Sunni taught my 12-year-old soul that the solutions we found aren't enough. But in fact, after acknowledging that problem, I had to acknowledge that the muck went deeper. My co-founder, Jane, who couldn't make it this evening, would share the story of Summer, who she taught while teaching in jails. Here in Utah County, actually. Summer came to class one day with a picture of her newborn daughter, Miriam. Sitting behind Summer in class that day was Summer's mother. Mother, daughter, granddaughter. The message was terrifying. 3 generations in prison at one time, and the story was common. A child's academic attainment is 90% predicted by their parents. A parent being in the home, their parents' education level. And children from entire communities like the one Summer grew up in expect to spend time in prison. 1 in 3 Black boys in America can expect to spend time behind bars. Right now, states spend a cumulative $74 billion incarcerating people every year. That's often $50,000 a year per person. That would pay for tuition to Exeter, the nation's leading boarding school. The prison problem in America, I had to acknowledge, was deep. It's a poverty-to-prison cycle affecting communities across the country, and prison is exacerbating it. I want to tell you about what the Reset Foundation is doing that's different. What if we acknowledged the problem? What if we built a new solution and had a fresh mindset about incarceration? The Reset Foundation is starting an alternative to prison entirely focused on the problem at hand. Rather than being sentenced to a traditional facility, a person is actually sentenced to a Reset campus, a place that is focused on an individual finding professional and personal success. It's about education in 3 ways. 1, academic education, working towards and perhaps beyond a high school diploma, and in a way that's different from many times the failing high schools that they attended. 2nd, it's education working towards a career, because the day you get out, you have to have a durable, living wage job. And that curriculum developed in conjunction with employers. And thirdly, and most importantly, it's an education that acknowledges the whole self in a healthy, loving environment. We do this at the same cost as prison today. It's the same cost in the short term, but people get out and stay out and become contributing members of their communities, saving in the long term over double. This year, we're launching a 5-year demonstration project to prove that this kind of incarceration actually improves public safety, saves money, and gives families a chance to lift themselves. People often ask me, don't you find working in this field a little bit depressing? And it turns out that drugs, crime, felonies, these aren't often your typical career starter words. But I actually find this work incredibly hopeful. David was spending time in a facility far away from New Orleans when he learned about the victims of Hurricane Katrina. And he wanted to help. Hearing of a drive to collect items, to donate, he searched around his cell for anything that he could give that was excess. And he found 2 envelopes. 2 envelopes for the victims of Hurricane Katrina, who, like David, had been separated from their families and lost their livelihoods. 2 envelopes to show that even though he couldn't leave, he could give to his brothers and sisters. And this story gives me hope almost more than any other. And the more that I've learned to acknowledge the depth of the muck that is the problem, the more I have to acknowledge that there is hope, that there is an innate human goodness that we can in fact rely on as we search for the right solutions. One more story. James is from New York. I met him as I began this working on Reset. He spent time in prison as well, and while he was there, thirsted for learning and for knowledge, and actually spent a good deal of his time coming up with a model of prison that would send the message not, you will be defined forever by your mistake, but instead, you can overcome your mistake. So naturally, we began swapping ideas and sharing stories. And in the middle of our conversation, James said, you know, Jen, you actually need me. You need me in the work that you're doing, and we need each other. And isn't that the truth? Because without the voices of the individuals and the families that this problem directly impacts, we'll get off track. At the same time, if this issue remains a niche issue that's only ever spoken about by the communities and the individuals that it directly impacts, it will also get off track. If women's rights were only ever spoken about by women, would women have ever gotten the vote? Until this issue becomes an American issue, until other 12-year-olds decide that this is their issue, it will never be fixed. I needed Sunni and James and Summer and David, and we in this room need each other. We need each other to tackle problems as big as this one. We need to acknowledge that they are deep, and the muck is deep, and that what we're doing right now isn't sufficient. But beneath all that there is hope. And if we can learn to acknowledge those things, then we will be able to more effectively run organizations, build movements, and celebrate victories large enough to meet their match. And it starts right here with acknowledging. Thank you very much.